crushing weight of public humiliation should have broken me that night as the champagne dripped from my expensive suit onto the marble floor of the Waldorf Astoria. But instead, with each mocking laugh that echoed through the grand ballroom, I felt the last threads of my marriage dissolving into cold, calculated resolve that would soon transform everything. "Ethan, why are you even here?" Victoria's voice cut through the ambient chatter of the gala, her crimson lips barely moving as she smiled for the cameras. My wife of 7 years, resplendent in her designer gown that cost more than what most people earned in a month, stood beside me like a stranger, her body language clearly communicating her discomfort at my presence. The air between us crackled with tension only we could feel, though several nearby guests had already noticed her dismissive glances in my direction. "I wanted to support you on your big night," I replied quietly, adjusting my tie. It wasn't a designer label like hers, just a simple charcoal suit that felt suddenly inadequate under the crystal chandeliers that bathed Manhattan's business elite in flattering golden light. The champagne in my hand remained untouched. I needed my wits about me tonight. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, her perfect smile never faltering for the benefit of potential investors hovering nearby. "Support? That's rich coming from you. Just try not to embarrass me tonight. This deal means everything. The culmination of years of sacrifice and strategic planning that you've never understood or appreciated." I nodded, swallowing the familiar bitter pill of her disdain, the taste of it acrid and stale after years of similar comments. Victoria Hale, celebrated CEO of Hale & Co., one of New York's fastest growing design corporations, had always seen me as her greatest liability, just an engineer who lacked vision, ambition, the killer instinct she so prized in her cutthroat world of corporate design and architecture. If only she knew the truth that lay beneath the facade of our increasingly hollow marriage. The ballroom glittered with New York's business royalty, gathered to witness the signing of a historic $550 million partnership between Hale & Cummers and Titan Developments. Victoria's crowning achievement after years of relentless climbing, stepping on competitors, colleagues, and ultimately her own husband. I watched her work the room with practiced precision, her laughter ringing hollow, her eyes constantly scanning for more important connections than the one she had pledged herself to 7 years ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced through the sophisticated sound system, his voice reverberating against the ornate ceiling. "Please welcome to the stage the visionary behind tonight's historic partnership, Victoria Hale." Applause erupted as Victoria ascended the steps, her midnight blue gown shimmering under the spotlights like a constellation pulled down from the night sky. I clapped along with everyone else, positioning myself near the edge of the crowd, observing the performance I had seen countless times before. The humble beginnings narrative she had crafted so carefully, omitting the considerable financial support and connections I had provided through channels she never bothered to investigate. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Victoria began, her voice smooth as polished marble. "This partnership represents not just a business transaction, but a vision for the future of design in America, a revolution in how we conceptualize urban spaces and the human experience within them." She spoke eloquently about innovation, about breaking barriers, about the future of architectural design merging with environmental consciousness. Not once did she acknowledge my presence or contribution to her journey. I was used to it, had grown accustomed to the erasure of my role in her success story. The familiar ache of disappointment had long since dulled to a numb acceptance. "And I must thank my extraordinary team, without whom none of this would be possible," she continued, gesturing toward her executives in the front row, each one dressed in designer clothes purchased with salaries inflated by projects I had quietly steered toward Hale & Co. through my network. Someone nudged me forward. "She's talking about you too, man. You should be up there with your wife on her big night," a well-meaning stranger whispered, unaware of the complex reality behind our marriage. I shook my head, but found myself pushed toward the stage anyway, by guests who assumed I should be sharing this moment of triumph. Victoria's eyes widened almost imperceptibly as I approached, a flash of panic quickly disguised behind her professional smile. The room quieted as I stepped onto the platform beside her, the sudden silence amplifying the sound of my footsteps across the polished stage. Ah, and here's my husband, everyone, she announced with a brittle laugh that sent warning signals to those who knew her well. Ethan likes to show up for the champagne and celebration after all the hard work is done. Don't you, darling? Nervous chuckles rippled through the audience. I remained silent, watching her carefully, noting the slight flush creeping up her neck. Not from embarrassment, but from anger at my unexpected intrusion into her carefully choreographed moment. Ethan works in engineering, she continued, her tone shifting to something dangerously sweet that made my spine stiffen in preparation for what would come next. He designs little bridges and infrastructure components while I build empires and transform skylines. We each have our place, I suppose. More laughter, less nervous this time. I felt hundreds of eyes on me, assessing, judging, pitying the husband so clearly overshadowed by his dynamic wife. Victoria's hand gripped my arm, her manicured nails digging through my jacket with enough force to leave marks, a physical warning to play along with her narrative. What Victoria means, I started to say, reaching for the microphone, my patience finally wearing thin after years of similar public diminishment. She pulled it away with practiced grace, her smile tightening. What I mean is that some of us are born to lead, to transform industries, to shape the future with bold vision and decisive action. And some, her gaze swept over me dismissively, making a spectacle of my supposed inadequacy, are content to follow, to exist in the shadows of greatness without ever reaching for it themselves. Isn't that right, darling? The room grew uncomfortably silent, the collective intake of breath almost audible as the assembled business elite recognized the line being crossed. A camera flashed, then another, tomorrow's tabloid fodder capturing itself in real time. Victoria, I whispered, leaning close to her ear. This isn't the place for whatever point you're trying to make. Actually, it's exactly the place, she cut me off, voice raised enough for the front rows to hear clearly. Everyone here understands ambition, vision, taking risks to achieve greatness. Everything you've avoided your entire life while I dragged us both toward success, despite your constant caution and limitation. I stood perfectly still, aware of the disaster unfolding, but strangely calm, almost detached as I watched her self-destruct before my eyes. 7 years of calculated patience, of building my empire in shadow while she constructed her facade in the spotlight, crystallized into this perfect moment of revelation. You've been dead weight on my journey for years, she continued, her voice rising with each word, intoxicated by her moment of triumph and the 3 glasses of champagne I'd watched her consume in rapid succession. Do you know what it's like trying to soar with someone determined to keep their feet on the ground? To have your own husband question every ambitious move, every necessary risk, to come home to that energy-draining doubt night after night? A suited executive from Titan Development stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the public airing of marital grievances. Perhaps we should proceed with the signing portion of the evening. No, Jack, it's fine, Victoria waved him off, her composure slipping further as she recognized her unprofessional behavior, but seemed unable to stop herself. My husband just surprised me by showing up uninvited to the most important night of my career, the night I secure a legacy while he... What did you do today, Ethan? File some paperwork? Check some calculations on another forgettable project no one will ever associate with your name? The crowd shifted uncomfortably, conversations rising to cover the awkwardness. Phones were raised, recording. Tomorrow's business news taking shape in real time, a career-defining moment transforming before their eyes into a career-threatening spectacle. Victoria, you've had too much to drink, I said quietly, reaching for her elbow to guide her away from the microphone before she could damage her reputation further. She jerked away, losing balance slightly, champagne sloshing in her glass and spilling onto the sleeve of her couture gown. Don't touch me. Don't you dare try to control this moment like you try to control everything else with your quiet disapproval and practical concerns. I'm not trying to control anything. I maintain my calm exterior while inwardly counting down to the culmination of years of planning. I'm trying to help you save face before you say something you'll regret tomorrow. Really? Because that's your specialty, isn't it? Controlling through mediocrity, making me feel guilty for having ambitions beyond a subdivision in Connecticut, and a sensible investment portfolio, for wanting more than your precious moderation in all things. I remained composed, watching her unravel thread by thread on the very stage where she had expected to cement her triumph. The symmetry was almost poetic. "You know what?" She raised her voice, addressing the crowd now, too far gone in her champagne-fueled resentment to recognize the career suicide she was committing. "This man has been the biggest obstacle to my success since the day we met. Always questioning, always doubting, always reminding me of limitations and practicalities when I needed support and belief." The Titan executive stepped forward again, desperation evident in his expression. "Mrs. Hale, perhaps we should take a brief intermission before the signing." "It's Ms. Hale professionally," she snapped, her eyes never leaving mine as years of suppressed resentment found their outlet. "You want to know the truth, Ethan? I've succeeded despite you, not because of you. Every milestone, every achievement came from my vision, my determination, my willingness to take risks while you counseled caution and restraint. And then it happened. The moment that would be replayed on business channels, social media, and gossip sites for weeks to come. Victoria, in her rage and triumph, lifted her champagne glass and deliberately poured its contents directly onto my chest. "There," she said as the golden liquid soaked through my shirt and expensive jacket. "Now you can leave. Go back to your safe, small life and leave the real achievements to those with the courage to claim them." The gasps were audible throughout the ballroom. Cameras flashed frantically. I stood motionless, champagne dripping from my chin onto my ruined shirt, my eyes locked with hers in perfect stillness. For the first time that evening, I smiled. The small, knowing smile seemed to unnerve her more than any reaction she'd anticipated. She took a half step back, sudden uncertainty clouding her expression as something in my demeanor finally penetrated her anger. "Congratulations on your deal, Victoria," I said quietly, my voice somehow carrying through the silent room. "I hope it's everything you believe it to be." I stepped off the stage, walking slowly through the parted crowd. No one stopped me. No one spoke. I felt their gazes, pitying, curious, embarrassed. But I walked with my shoulders straight, my pace unhurried, leaving a trail of champagne droplets across the imported marble floor. Outside, the night air hit my damp shirt, sending a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with temperature. I didn't call for the valet to retrieve my modest car, parked among the Bentleys and Maseratis. Instead, I walked half a block to where Marcus, my most trusted employee, waited with the vehicle Victoria had never seen. "Everything go as expected, sir?" he asked, opening the door to the black Cadillac with tinted windows that cost more than Victoria thought I earned in a year. "Exactly as expected," I replied, sliding into the back seat. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I rarely used, reserved for contingencies such as tonight. "It's time," I said when the line connected. She made her choice. Execute everything as planned. No hesitation, no mercy. I ended the call and leaned back against the hand-stitched leather seat, closing my eyes briefly. 7 years of marriage, 3 years of meticulous planning, one night to change everything. "Where to, sir?" Marcus asked, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror, with understanding that came from years of loyal service. "The tower," I replied. "I need to be there when it happens." As the car pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back at the glittering hotel where Victoria was about to experience the beginning of her spectacular downfall. I didn't need to. I'd orchestrated every detail of what would follow with the precision of the engineer she so casually dismissed. What Victoria never understood, what no one in her social circle understood, was that my quietness wasn't weakness. My patience wasn't complacency. My careful planning wasn't lack of ambition. And my engineering background wasn't limited to little bridges, but extended to the careful construction of corporate empires that operated in shadow. The Grayson Holdings building stood dark against the night sky, its upper floors invisible in the low clouds that shrouded Manhattan. Marcus pulled into the private underground garage, and I took the express elevator to the 87th floor, a penthouse office that occupied the entire level, though I rarely used it, preferring to work from my more modest satellite offices where I could maintain the facade Victoria had never bothered to question. "Mr. Grayson," My assistant Rebecca greeted me as I stepped off the elevator, her efficiency a stark contrast to Victoria's team of fashionable but often incompetent staff. Everything is prepared as you requested. The team is standing by. The wall of monitors in my private office displayed various news feeds, social media reactions beginning to spread across Twitter and Instagram, and most importantly, the live feed from the gala. Victoria stood on the stage beside the Titan Development's team, pen poised above contract papers, her smile radiant despite the earlier scene. She believed she'd weathered the storm of her outburst, that tomorrow's headlines about her treatment of her husband would be overshadowed by the magnitude of her deal. She was catastrophically wrong. "Rebecca, please send in the team," I said, not taking my eyes off the monitors where Victoria's triumphant moment balanced on a precipice she couldn't see. Within minutes, my inner circle had assembled. Jameson, my chief legal counsel, who had structured the complex ownership arrangements that kept my name off public records. Diane, head of acquisitions, who had helped build my corporate network through shell companies and private equity vehicles. Michael, financial strategist whose brilliance had multiplied my inheritance tenfold. And Samuel, my oldest friend from college and the public face of Titan Developments. "Is the champagne still drying on your shirt, or should I have something sent up?" Samuel asked with a smirk, his irreverence a welcome change from the tense atmosphere of the gala. "I've changed," I replied simply, gesturing to the fresh shirt hanging in my private bathroom. "And I believe it's time for Victoria to experience some changes as well." Jameson cleared his throat, straightening his impeccable tie. "All documentation is prepared, sir. The moment you give the word, Titan withdraws from the deal, citing irreconcilable differences in corporate culture and leadership values. The language is carefully crafted to reference tonight's incident without explicit mention. The press release emphasizes Titan's commitment to respectful business environments and ethical leadership," Diana added, her tablet displaying the statement already formatted for immediate release, without explicitly mentioning tonight's incident, though the implication will be unmistakable. "And financial implications?" I asked, turning to Michael, whose analytical mind had mapped out every potential consequence with algorithmic precision. "Devastating," he answered without emotion. "We've already alerted certain key investors about potential leadership concerns at Hale & Co. The moment the deal collapses, we expect their stock to drop at least 30% by opening bell. The credit extension they secured based on this partnership will be revoked by mid-morning, creating an immediate cash flow crisis." I nodded, watching Victoria smile and pose for photos on the monitor, her posture radiating confidence, her expression triumphant as she prepared to sign the documents that would, she believed, cement her legacy. She looked so certain of her victory, so unaware of the trap closing around her. "Samuel," I said quietly, "you're up." Samuel straightened his tie and nodded grimly. "I never liked her, Ethan. Too much ambition, not enough substance. The champagne incident just confirmed what I've always thought. Your personal feelings are irrelevant," I replied coldly. "This isn't about emotion, it's business. She made a business decision to humiliate me, and now she'll face the business consequences." On the monitor, I watched Samuel return to the ballroom, walking briskly toward the stage with the confidence of someone used to commanding attention. He whispered something to Jack, the public-facing executive who'd been handling the signing. Jack's expression shifted from confusion to shock to grave understanding. Victoria noticed, her smile faltering as she registered the change in atmosphere. "Mr. Reynolds from Titan's legal team is approaching with the termination notice," Rebecca narrated unnecessarily as we all watched the drama unfolding in high-definition clarity. Victoria's face transformed as she read the document thrust into her hands. Confusion, disbelief, panic. The blood visibly drained from her face as she looked up at Samuel, mouth-forming questions no one could hear through the muted feed. Samuel merely shook his head and stepped back, gesturing for his team to exit the stage. The cameras continued to flash, capturing Victoria's mounting horror as she realized her triumph was evaporating before her eyes. The contract papers remained unsigned, the pen slipping from her fingers and rolling across the table unnoticed. "Sir," Jameson said tentatively, "are you certain this is how you want to proceed? The collateral damage to Hale & Co. will be extensive. Many innocent employees..." This isn't vengeance, James. It's correction, I interrupted, turning from the screens to face my team directly. Victoria built her success on manipulating others, taking credit for work she didn't do, and stepping on anyone in her path, including me. But I've planned for the innocents caught in the crossfire. But the collateral damage will be minimized, I stated firmly. The employees of Hale and Conyer will be absorbed into appropriate positions within our subsidiaries. No one loses their livelihood except those who helped her climb by pushing others down. I've already identified the key talent worth salvaging and created positions for them. I moved to the window, looking out over the city I'd quietly shaped while Victoria thought I was designing little bridges and calculating load-bearing capacities. My reflection stared back at me, resolute and unfamiliar even to myself. 7 years, I said softly. 7 years watching her become someone I don't recognize. Someone who would humiliate her husband publicly without a second thought. Someone who would pour champagne on the man she once claimed to love for the crime of being less ambitious than she desired. No one spoke. They knew the story, how I'd met Victoria when she was a talented but struggling designer with big dreams and a warm heart. How I'd fallen for her creativity, her passion, her drive that seemed then like determination rather than ruthlessness. How I'd supported her rise, opened doors through connections I'd never mentioned, invested in her company through channels she never traced back to me, and how I'd watched her change as success came, her warmth calcifying into ambition, her passion hardening into ruthlessness, her appreciation transforming into entitlement, until the woman I married existed only in memory. The news cycle begins in 20 minutes, Rebecca reminded gently. The major business channels are already running teasers about dramatic developments at tonight's signing. I nodded, the decision already made long before tonight's public confirmation of what our marriage had become. Release everything as planned, and make sure the profile pieces on me remain embargoed until tomorrow afternoon. This isn't about my reveal. It's about her choices and their consequences. Diana's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and looked up grimly. Victoria's trying to reach Samuel. She's threatening legal action, claiming breach of contract and intentional interference with business relationships. I almost smiled at the predictability of her response. She hasn't realized yet that no contract was ever finalized. The papers she was about to sign had been subtly altered this morning. If she'd bothered to have her counsel review them one last time, she might have noticed the poison pill clauses that would have given us controlling interest in her company, regardless of outcome. She's calling her board members, Michael reported, monitoring another feed on his tablet. They're not answering? Not a single one has picked up after multiple attempts. Of course not, I replied. They're all receiving detailed reports of financial irregularities in her expense accounts right about now. Nothing criminal, Victoria's too careful for that, but certainly questionable enough to warrant distancing themselves from her leadership during an investigation. I watched the monitors as Victoria was escorted from the stage, her face a mask of barely controlled panic, her carefully applied makeup now smudged from repeated touches to her face. The crowd that had been adoring her minutes ago now parted, avoiding eye contact, already sensing the shift in power dynamics that happens instantly in New York business circles when someone falls from grace. Sir, Rebecca said quietly, your car is ready whenever you wish to leave. The penthouse has been prepared if you'd prefer not to return to the Manhattan apartment tonight. I nodded, but made no move to go. I'll stay. I want to monitor the situation through the night. We've planned this for too long to miss any critical developments. One by one, my team departed, each with clear assignments for managing the fallout from Victoria's spectacular fall from grace. Only Samuel remained, pouring himself a generous scotch from my private bar after returning from his mission at the gala. That woman really believed she was untouchable, he remarked, sinking into a leather chair across from my desk. The look on her face when I told her the deal was dead, priceless, worth every minute of having to play subordinate to her these past months. This gives me no pleasure, Sam, I said quietly, though the statement wasn't entirely true. Some primal part of me had indeed found satisfaction in the symmetry of her public downfall matching her public disrespect. He studied me over his glass. No, not even a little? After the way she spoke to you, the way she's treated you for years, the affairs she thought you didn't know about? I turned back to the window, avoiding his perceptive gaze. I loved her once. And now? The question hung in the air between us. On the monitors behind me, Victoria was shown leaving the hotel, reporters swarming around her, camera lights illuminating her shocked expression as she held up a hand to shield herself from their intrusive lenses. Now I'm just doing what needs to be done, I answered finally, what she forced me to do through her own actions. The night stretched long as we monitored the unfolding crisis. Victoria made 17 calls to my phone, all unanswered. She left messages that evolved from angry demands to confused questions to finally tearful pleas. I listened to each one, my resolve unchanged despite the tremor in her voice as reality crashed down around her. By dawn, the business world was ablaze with the story. Every major outlet ran some variation of the same headline. Hale & Co. deal collapses after CEO's public meltdown. The video of Victoria pouring champagne on me had gone viral, cut and edited to maximize drama, playing on financial news channels on constant repeat. Statements from anonymous sources within Titan cited concerns about Victoria's leadership style and emotional stability. "Your wife is finished in this town," Samuel said bluntly, as we watched the morning shows dissect every moment of her downfall with the ruthless precision New York reserves for the formerly successful. "No one will touch her after this. Not as a CEO, not as a designer, not even as a consultant." "She's resourceful," I replied, though I knew better. The machinery I'd set in motion was too powerful, too thorough. Victoria had always succeeded because invisible hands, my hands, had cleared obstacles from her path. Now those same hands were creating roadblocks she could never overcome. "What's your next move?" Mr. Samuel asked, stretching his tired limbs after our all-night vigil. "I'm going home," I said simply. He looked surprised. "To the penthouse? Where she is?" "No," I corrected him. "To my home. In Greenwich." The house in Greenwich, Connecticut was my sanctuary, a colonial mansion on 5 manicured acres that Victoria rarely visited, claiming it was too far from the action and deadly boring. She preferred our Manhattan penthouse, closer to the social world she craved and the business contacts she cultivated. What she never knew was that the Greenwich property housed my actual operational base, the nerve center of Grayson Holdings and its dozen subsidiary companies, including Titan Developments. As Marcus drove me through the morning traffic, I finally listened to Victoria's latest voicemail, her once confident voice now ragged with exhaustion and fear. "Ethan," her voice was raw, barely recognizable. "Please call me back. Something's happened with the deal. Everything's falling apart. I need you. I need your help." A pause, then softer. "I'm sorry about last night. I was stressed and drunk, and please just call me. I don't understand what's happening." Too little. Too late. The woman who'd poured champagne on me and called me an obstacle to her success now wanted my help navigating the crisis I had engineered with mathematical precision. The irony wasn't lost on me as I deleted the message and turned off my phone. The Greenwich house stood silent among ancient oak trees, its colonial architecture a stark contrast to the ultra-modern penthouse Victoria had insisted on buying at 3 times its actual value for the prestige of the address. I dismissed Marcus and walked the stone path to the front door alone, breathing in the cool morning air, scented with the roses my gardener maintained with obsessive care. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it weeks ago. Victoria hadn't been here since Christmas, and even then she'd spent most of the time on conference calls, counting the hours until we could return to the city where she felt alive and important. I went straight to my study and activated the security system that transformed the room. Bookshelves slid aside, revealing additional monitors and communication systems. The simple antique desk revolved, replacing itself with a larger workstation equipped with everything I needed to run my empire remotely. Rebecca's face appeared on the main screen. "Good morning, sir. I trust the drive was uneventful?" "It was," I confirmed. "Status report?" Hale & Comer's stock opened down 42%. Trading was temporarily halted due to volatility. Their credit line has been frozen pending review, and 3 board members have resigned, citing personal reasons but clearly distancing themselves from the company's troubles. I nodded. unsurprised by developments that followed the scenario we had gamed out months ago. And Victoria? Currently at your Manhattan penthouse. She's made 23 attempts to contact you and has called her attorney 11 times. Her assistant quit an hour ago, along with her head of communications and 2 senior designers who received our discreet employment offers. Has she made any public statements? A brief, ill-advised Instagram post claiming sabotage and gender discrimination. It was deleted within 20 minutes, but not before several news outlets captured screenshots. Her social media manager has also resigned, citing a toxic work environment. I sighed. Victoria was panicking, making rookie mistakes that only accelerated her downfall. Part of me had expected more resilience, more strategic thinking in crisis. The woman I'd married would have found a way to counterattack, to turn disaster into opportunity. This fragile, reactive person was a stranger wearing my wife's designer clothes. Sir, Rebecca hesitated, unusual for her typically direct communication style. There's something else you should know. The investigation into Hale & Co.'s finances has uncovered some irregularities we weren't aware of during preliminary due diligence. I straightened in my chair, attention sharpening. What kind of irregularities? It appears Mrs. Grayson has been systematically inflating the company's performance metrics for at least 2 years. Nothing that would qualify as criminal fraud under strict interpretation, but certainly misleading to investors. And there are significant personal expenses being channeled through corporate accounts. Designer clothes, jewelry, personal travel classified as business development. That explained a lot. Victoria's meteoric rise had seemed extraordinary even with my invisible support. Now I understood. She'd been cooking the books, presenting an illusion of success greater than reality, maintaining appearances at the expense of substance. Forward everything to Jameson's team, I instructed. No leaks to the press for now. This may be useful leverage, but I won't destroy her completely unless necessary. Rebecca nodded. There's one more thing, sir. We've been monitoring Mrs. Grayson's personal communications as requested. I raised an eyebrow. This was a line I'd been reluctant to cross, authorizing it only after Victoria's public display convinced me there might be more I didn't know about the woman I'd married. She's been in regular contact with Jonathan Mercer, Rebecca continued, unable to keep a note of distaste from her voice. The name hit me like a physical blow. Jonathan Mercer, my supposed friend, CEO of a competing development company, and a man who'd made no secret of his attraction to Victoria at social events, his eyes following her across rooms while he smiled and shook my hand. Define regular contact, I said, my voice steady despite the sudden cold feeling spreading through my chest. Phone calls, text messages, and hotel meetings, sir. Dating back approximately 8 months. The Drake Hotel, usually midweek afternoons. 8 months. While I was overseeing the Dubai project that kept me traveling for weeks at a time, while Victoria was telling me she was too busy for our planned anniversary trip to the Maldives, while she was apparently finding time for afternoon tryst with a man who called me friend to my face. The content of these communications strongly suggests an intimate relationship, Rebecca finished, clearly uncomfortable delivering this final betrayal. There are explicit photographs exchanged and detailed messages about their encounters. I see, I said after a long moment. Thank you, Rebecca. That will be all for now. The screen went dark, leaving me alone with this final betrayal. Oddly, I felt nothing at first. No anger, no hurt. Just a strange, detached sense of confirmation that the woman I'd married was truly gone, replaced by someone capable of betrayal on every level. Then slowly, a cold resolve crystallized within me. What had begun as a lesson, a harsh but ultimately corrective measure that might have left Victoria humbled but still standing, now needed to become something else entirely. I reached for my phone and called Jameson. Change of plans, I said when he answered. Victoria doesn't just lose the deal, she loses everything. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of strategic calls, legal maneuvers, and careful information releases. I worked almost without sleep, orchestrating Victoria's complete professional dismantling with cold precision that surprised even my closest advisors. By the third day, Hale & Co. stock had lost 70% of its value. Major clients were publicly distancing themselves, canceling contracts with penalty payments they were willing to make rather than maintain association. The board had called an emergency meeting to discuss Victoria's removal, and the financial press had begun investigating the accounting irregularities, tipped off by anonymous industry sources. I was reviewing the latest reports when my security team alerted me through the intercom. "Sir, Mrs. Grayson has just passed through the main gate. She's approaching the house." I glanced at the surveillance feed on one of my monitors. Victoria's white Mercedes was indeed coming up the driveway, moving too fast, nearly clipping a decorative stone planter. I'd been expecting this confrontation, though not quite so soon. "No interruptions," I instructed the team. "Whatever happens, whatever you hear, do not enter unless I activate the emergency signal." I deactivated the study's security systems, returning it to its innocent appearance as a traditional gentleman's study with leather-bound books and hunting prints. Then I poured myself a scotch and waited, seated behind the antique desk that concealed so many secrets. The front door slammed open with enough force to rattle the windows. Victoria's heels clicked rapidly across the marble foyer, the sound growing louder as she approached my sanctuary. "Ethan!" she shouted, her voice hoarse. "I know you're here. Your security thugs wouldn't let me in unless you were." I didn't answer, taking a slow sip of my drink instead, preparing myself for the confrontation 7 years in the making. She found me moments later, bursting into the study with wild eyes and disheveled hair, so unlike her usual perfectly coiffed appearance that cultivated effortless elegance. Her designer outfit was wrinkled, her makeup smudged as if she'd been crying and hastily tried to repair the damage. The woman who never allowed herself to be seen less than perfect now stood before me, coming apart at the seams. "You," she said, stopping abruptly when she saw me sitting calmly behind my desk. "What have you done?" "Hello, Victoria," I replied evenly. "You look tired. Would you like a drink?" She stepped closer, her composure cracking further with each step. "Don't you dare! Don't you dare sit there looking so smug while my life falls apart around me." "Your life or just your career?" I asked, genuinely curious which she valued more. "They're the same thing," she cried, slamming her hands on my desk hard enough to knock over a crystal paperweight. "You know they're the same for me. Everything I've worked for, everything I've sacrificed for, is disintegrating. And somehow, it all leads back to you." I set my glass down carefully on a coaster. "How did you reach that conclusion?" "Because it's too coordinated, too precise." Victoria's voice rose hysterically as she paced the room like a caged animal. "The deal collapses the same night we had that scene. Then my investors pull out simultaneously. Then my board turns on me without warning. Then the press starts circling like vultures with information they shouldn't have. It's a takedown, not a coincidence." Her perception had always been one of her strengths, her ability to connect dots and see patterns that others missed. It had served her well in business, though never well enough to see through the careful construction of my separate life. "And what made you think I could orchestrate something of that magnitude?" I asked quietly. "I'm just an engineer who designs little bridges, remember? A man without vision or ambition, content to stay in my safe, small life while you soared?" Victoria's expression faltered, uncertainty creeping in for the first time as she studied my face more carefully. I don't know, but you're the only one who had reason to want me to fail. The only one with motive after what happened at the gala." "That's not true," I replied, standing slowly to equalize our positions. "You've made plenty of enemies on your way up, Victoria. People you stepped on, deals you stole, colleagues you undermined. The business world loves a success story, but it positively celebrates a spectacular fall." She shook her head frantically, blonde hair whipping around her face. No, this is different. This is personal. This is calculated. This is someone with resources and influence I can't even identify." "Like pouring champagne on your husband in front of hundreds of witnesses?" I countered, my voice still calm despite the accusation. "Was that not personal? Not calculated to diminish me publicly?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "I apologize for that. I called you dozens of times." "After your deal collapsed," I noted. "Not before. Not in the moment you made the choice to humiliate me. Only when you needed something from me did apologies suddenly matter." Victoria ran her hands through her hair. further disheveling it. What do you want from me, Ethan? Do you want me to beg? Fine, I'm begging. Please, please, make this. Stop. Whatever you're doing, however you're doing it, just make it stop. I'll do anything. I studied her dispassionately. The woman before me bore little resemblance to the confident, ambitious designer I'd fallen in love with, or even the cold, status-obsessed executive she'd become. This was someone broken, desperate, unrecognizable. It's too late, Victoria. What do you mean, too late? It's never too late. Her voice rose again, desperation making her grab my arm with surprising strength. We can fix this. I can apologize publicly, say I was under stress, blame it on medication, anything. Just help me salvage what's left. I walked to the window, disengaging from her grip to look out at the gardens Victoria had never appreciated despite their careful design and maintenance. Do you know what Grayson Holdings is? She blinked, thrown by the apparent non sequitur. What? Your little consulting firm? What does that have to do with anything? I turned back to her, my decision crystallizing in the face of her complete lack of awareness. Grayson Holdings is the parent company of Titan Developments. Victoria stared at me, uncomprehending at first. Then slowly, horrifying understanding dawned across her face as connections she should have made years ago finally aligned in her mind. No, she whispered. That's not possible. That can't be possible. It's not just possible, it's reality, I replied calmly. I own Titan through a series of shell corporations and investment vehicles specifically designed to keep my involvement private. I've owned it for 5 years. But that would mean... Her voice trailed off as the implications cascaded through her mind like falling dominoes. That would mean, I continued for her, that you were negotiating with my company for a partnership that I could approve or dissolve with a single word. That the deal you staked your reputation on was always in my control. That your greatest professional triumph was something I allowed you to pursue, knowing it could be taken away at any moment. Victoria sank into the nearest chair, her legs seemingly unable to support her any longer as the magnitude of her misunderstanding became clear. Why didn't you tell me? Why keep this secret for years? Would it have changed how you treated me? I asked simply. Would knowing my true financial position have made you respect me more? Or would you have just seen me as another asset to exploit? Another stepping stone on your path to whatever you imagine success to be? That's not fair, she protested weakly. I'm not that person. Aren't you? Tell me something, Victoria. How long have you been sleeping with Jonathan Mercer? Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shock that I possessed this most private betrayal. What? How did you? 8 months, I answered for her. While I was working in Dubai, flying back every other weekend to spend time with you. The same Jonathan who's been trying to undercut my projects for years, the same Jonathan who calls me friend while taking my wife to the Drake Hotel on Tuesday afternoons. Was he a good lover, Victoria? Or just a useful connection to another power player? It wasn't like that, she whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks and ruining what remained of her makeup. We were both lonely and you were always working, always distracted. I laughed humorlessly. Always working, yes I was. Building something substantial while you were building an illusion funded by creative accounting and my silent investment. Tell me, did Jonathan know he was sleeping with the wife of his biggest competitor? Or were you keeping my true position secret from him too? Victoria stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, the stranger revealed beneath the comfortable assumption of a simple engineer with limited ambitions. Who are you? I'm the man you married, I replied simply. The man you chose not to see because the reality didn't fit the narrative you preferred. I walked to my desk and removed a folder, sliding it across to her. Divorce papers. My attorneys have already highlighted where you need to sign. Everything is quite straightforward. She made no move to take them. Ethan, please, we can work through this. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But 7 years of marriage has to be worth something. We can get counseling, start over somewhere new. It was worth everything to me, I said quietly, until it wasn't. Until I watched you become someone who would betray me professionally and personally without hesitation or remorse. Until champagne dripping down my shirt in front of New York's elite. Victoria looked down at her hands, tears dripping onto her expensive manicure, creating smudges of the polish she'd chosen to match her outfit for tonight's triumph that never materialized. What happens to me after I sign these? Professionally, Hale & Co. will file for bankruptcy protection by the end of the month. Your board will terminate you tomorrow regardless of what happens here. Your reputation in the industry is compromised, to put it mildly. And personally, financially? I hesitated, then decided on honesty. The prenuptial agreement stands. You'll retain the penthouse and a settlement sufficient to maintain your lifestyle for several years, provided you live modestly. Your accounts at the major design houses have been closed to prevent further charges to the corporate accounts. My clothing allowance, she asked, almost childlike in her shock at the smallest of her losses. My standing reservations at Laurent's? Terminated along with the platinum cards that were being paid by Hale & Co., rather than our personal accounts, as you arranged without my knowledge. She looked around the study that had never interested her before, seeing it with new eyes now that she understood what it represented. And us? Is there any chance for reconciliation? Any path back from this precipice? No, I said, firmly. That ended the moment you decided I was an obstacle rather than a partner. The moment you chose advancement over respect. The moment champagne soaked my shirt on stage. Victoria nodded slowly, reaching for the folder with trembling hands. You planned all this so meticulously. The deal, the takedown, even having these papers ready. How long have you been waiting to destroy me, Ethan? I considered the question carefully, wanting to give her the truth she'd never offered me. I wasn't waiting to destroy you, Victoria. I was waiting for you to remember who we were together. When you poured that champagne on me, I finally accepted you never would. She opened the folder, staring blankly at the legal language that would end our marriage and finalize her fall from grace. I did love you once, you know, before everything got so complicated, before success changed me in ways I didn't even recognize until this moment. I know, I said softly. I remember that woman. I wish she was still here. Victoria signed the documents without further argument, her signature as elegant as ever despite her shaking hand. When she finished, she closed the folder and pushed it back across the desk, a symbolic surrender of the life she'd built and lost. What happens now? She asked, sounding utterly lost, a woman without direction for perhaps the first time since I'd known her. Now you leave, I replied simply. My driver will take you back to the city. Take some time to decide what you want your next chapter to look like. You're still talented, still capable, just perhaps not as CEO material. She stood, smoothing her rumpled clothes in an automatic gesture of composure. Will I see you again? No. Victoria nodded as if this was exactly the answer she'd expected. She walked to the door, then paused, looking back at me one last time, memorizing the face of the man she'd underestimated so catastrophically. For what it's worth, I am sorry, Ethan. Not just for the champagne, for everything, for becoming someone neither of us recognizes, for forgetting what mattered while chasing what glittered. I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late to matter, some wounds cut too deep to heal with mere words. The damage had been done through repeated choices, not a single mistake. After she left, I poured another scotch and called Samuel. It's done, I told him. Have Jameson file the papers immediately. And Hale & Co.? He asked, his tone suggesting he expected scorched earth. I stared into my drink for a long moment, considering. Proceed as planned, complete dismantling, but ensure the employees land safely at other firms. This was Victoria's failure, not theirs. And Victoria herself? Do we continue with the planned revelations about her affair with Mercer? The accounting irregularities? We could bury her so deep professionally she'd never resurface. I considered the question. Despite everything, some small part of me still remembered the woman I'd fallen in love with, passionate, creative, alive with possibilities before ambition corrupted her core. Leave her alone, I decided finally. She's lost enough. Her company, her reputation, her marriage. Let her keep her dignity, at least what remains of it. You're a better man than I am, Samuel remarked. After what she did, both professionally and personally. This was never about revenge, I interrupted. It was about consequences, about correcting an imbalance. She's experienced those consequences now. There's no need to grind her into dust. After hanging up, I walked through the silent house to the back terrace overlooking the gardens. Victoria had always complained were too traditional, too understated for her taste. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that no designer could replicate, no matter their talent or resources. I thought about power, how Victoria had craved its appearance while I had quietly amassed its reality, how she had needed the world to see her success while I had been content to build mine in shadow, how her empire had been built on perception while mine rested on concrete foundations she'd never bothered to investigate. In the weeks that followed, I watched from a distance as Victoria attempted to rebuild some semblance of a life and career. Her efforts were predictably futile. Doors that once opened eagerly for her now remained firmly closed. The industry that had celebrated her now whispered about her fall. Former friends avoided her calls, afraid her misfortune might somehow be contagious in the superstitious world of New York business. Jonathan Mercer, unsurprisingly, denied their relationship when questioned by gossip columnists, claiming Victoria had misinterpreted their friendship and that he had always maintained appropriate professional boundaries with his friend's wife. When his own company mysteriously lost 3 major contracts the following month, he never connected it to his betrayal of a man he'd underestimated as severely as Victoria had. The penthouse sold quickly, Victoria unable to maintain the astronomical monthly fees without her income. She moved to a much smaller apartment in Brooklyn, occasionally appearing at industry events where she was politely but firmly relegated to the periphery. A living cautionary tale of how quickly fortunes could change. I considered reaching out once or twice, some residual sense of responsibility, or perhaps nostalgia nagging at me during quiet moments, but each time I remembered her words on that fateful night. "You've been dead weight on my journey for years. Let her journey continue without me, finding its own level without my interference, positive or negative." 6 months after our divorce, I finally allowed the profile piece that business journalists had been clamoring for since the night of Victoria's public implosion and the subsequent revelations about my true position. The Wall Street Journal ran it under the headline, "The Silent Titan: How Ethan Grayson Built a Billion-Dollar Empire in Secret." The article detailed my methodical acquisition of companies, my innovation in sustainable development practices, and my preference for working behind the scenes while others took public credit. It mentioned my marriage to Victoria only briefly, noting that, despite his connection to one of New York's most visible design personalities, Grayson maintained his characteristic privacy throughout their relationship. The morning it was published, I received a text from an unknown number. "I never knew you at all, did I? Congratulations on your empire. V." I didn't respond. Some conversations are better left ended, some chapters better left closed. If you like this story, please click the hype button. This video deserves to be popular. Have a nice rest.